What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Agape Night. Hope you are stoked to be here as much as we are. This is a night where we talk about all things dating, love, relationships, money, sex, and a lot of topics. Things that we just feel, not only as pastors, but as people who love Jesus, that they're just some things that we need a little bit more input on, a Christian take on, some conversation around, especially when it comes to the relationships that we have, whether we're dating, whether we're engaged, whether we're single, whether we are married, whether it's complicated, wherever you happen to be. I hope that today will meet you wherever you happen to be. Typically, we choose a topic that is something that we're like, hey, this would be something that we should probably talk about. So, welcome to Agape Night. My name is Reuben. This is my beautiful wife, Dora, and I am stoked. Yes, and I'm stoked. I'm stoked for today. You want to tell them the topic for today, in case there's some people that don't follow us on Instagram and don't know what it is?
Today we're going to be talking about red flags.
I didn't bring a prop today. I wanted to bring a prop. Somebody mentioned it earlier too. I wanted to bring a prop, like a red flag. And like every time we talk about one, just wave it. Red flag.
Hand red flags out at the door.
If you happen to have a red flag on you, I'm willing to use it for today. But if you don't, that's okay. We're going to make do anyways, talking about red flags. What is a red flag? Are we going to hop into what is a red flag?
Feel free.
Red flags are those things that, it's interesting because you can look at it from different perspectives. Typically, there's kind of like a red light. It's like this thing that someone has, whether it's, a characteristic, a habit, or something that they do that causes you to kind of go, maybe there's something that I should be alert to. Maybe there's something that I need to be a little bit more aware of. Maybe there's something that is a bit concerning here. And so we call it a red flag. Whether you're, dating and there's something that kind of like comes up that could be, I don't know if it's a deal breaker or if it's something that just needs to be addressed, immediately, but that's something that could be considered a red flag. And so today we're going to be talking about, when it comes to those relationships that we have, what those red flags could look like, what are red flags really, and what if you're the person with the red flag? What do you do if you're in a relationship with someone who you think might have a red flag? How do you process that, approach that, and even just assess that as followers of Jesus? That's usually the take that we take. And so whether you're a Christian or not, hopefully you're able to take away something from today. But that's kind of the position we're going to be taking today as we approach how do we deal with red flags. Whether it's you're dating someone new and you're like, I just saw something, or it's like I'm 10 years married and bro, that's what and you didn't see it coming. We're 7 right now, so you never. I'm just joking. You never know. Just joking though. All right.
That's a red flag.
All right, let's hop in. Some common red flags.
So the first one, and it's a super obvious one, you guys know where I'm going to go with this, but the first one that comes to mind is if you are a Christian and you are dating a non-Christian or a non-believer, that is a red flag.
I so want the flag right now. So wave it around at this moment. Sorry, continue.
I mean, just generally and broadly, beyond Christianity and beyond, what we believe as Christians, dating somebody who disagrees with you on your core moral and religious values is a red flag. Those are people who their values don't line up with you. They may not have the same moral standards that you have. They may do things that you consider shady. So some of those things that as believers especially, but even generally, like if you're a non-Christian, you're listening to this, it's not that we say like, hey, you are bad. And
you're undateable.
It's not that at all. It's that when we consider where we should, like our moral values and our religious values, those things should line up, because it actually sets us up for success rather than setting us up for fights and complications and failure.
It's more like you just don't match up. It's like an orange and apple. Hey, both are great fruits, but they're not necessarily in the same category. They don't necessarily match up. One verse, 2 Corinthians 6:14. You mind reading it?
2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14, it says, "Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness, or what fellowship has light with darkness?"
Yeah, and so that idea of not, when other versions could talk about not being mismatched. Sorry, guys, I don't know why I'm getting this cough. Not being mismatched. Kind of being able to, be on the same page. And what we typically find is that when you have a non-Christian and a Christian in a relationship, sure, today it might look fine. Sure, today it might be like, oh, this is so dandy and it's so nice and the butterflies are great and I feel so awesome. But the truth is that's not going to last. It's like a fading away ice pop that you're eating. It's going to melt away, or you're going to eat it. It's gone. It's good for a moment, but it's not something that's going to last forever. It's not something that's going to stand the test of time. And so as Christians, we take the perspective of it is so important that you find someone who understands why you believe what you believe. Even as a Christian, finding someone who believes, similarly what you believe. Because like Dora and I, we don't believe everything the exact same. There's some things that we differ on, but some core principles about what we believe, those are like unshakable. And I think part of actually even, dating is getting to the point where you know what you believe. Yeah, oftentimes I find people who are like, I'm Christian, I'm dating. I'm like, but you're just figuring out what you believe in. Like, that's really hard because you don't know what you're going to walk into. You're not walking in prepared. So, yeah, not a believer is a huge one.
Yeah, and I think under that umbrella, you can kind of just talk about moral values and moral standards as a whole, because when we say, dating a believer, we are assuming that this person is genuine in their faith and they are aspiring to live a life of integrity. And so you're both doing that together, and so you have similar moral standards about what is right and what is wrong and where those lines can be drawn. And so even having those conversations about what are you okay with? What lines are you pretty hard on that you're like, I'm not going to cross this line? Not just in your within your relationship, but just generally, is this person somebody who's okay to gossip and stab a friend in the back? Somebody who's okay with lying or cheating? Somebody who's okay with just kind of working in the gray because it gets them where they want to be. So having some of those moral conversations and understanding, is this person living a life that I believe is ethical and one of integrity, that I actually can value the same things as they do?
Yeah, the end part of that verse there, or what fellowship, what union, what connection does light have with darkness? He's depicting, look, you're opposites, and you can't really coexist in the same space. And if you try to do that, it's disaster. So, yeah. Number 2.
So the second red flag that came to mind as we were talking about this is emotional abuse.
Appreciate it.
So when we talk about emotional abuse, I'll just list off a couple of examples. So things like being overly controlling, manipulation, verbal abuse, gaslighting, being punitive. So just some of those things that come to mind, that usually when we think of emotional abuse, we think of someone who is abusing your emotions, and generally for their own gain. So they're doing something that is hurting you, and they do that so that they can benefit in some way.
Yeah. The scripture talks about abuse in general, but also makes a point to talk about how we will abuse the emotional aspect of our beings and of our relationship as we try to relate to one another. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29, right? let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear it. There's an assumption here that is what is happening. I don't think we need the Bible to tell us that that's what we do as people. We'll use our words to attack other people, to take other people down at their expense so that we are in a better position. And sometimes it actually is in a place where we're in a relationship with someone, and because of this unhealthy habit we might have, guess who usually gets the worst of it? The people that are the closest to you. You know, when Dora and I first got married, let's be honest, the ugliest side of ourselves is seen to the other person. You don't really see it until you get married. You're living with each other. You're doing the daily grind of making big decisions every single day, and small ones too. And that's when the ugly side comes out, and you don't even realize, you know, there are parts of you that you didn't even know was you until you were pushed a certain way, you were rubbed the wrong way, and you're like, wow, where is this coming from? And so then that can actually lead to, oh, I'm going to, you know, treat this person in a specific way, and it ends up being emotionally abusive. And so choosing to take control of what we say, how we act, is so crucial. The scripture also talks about this in other verses as well.
Yeah, so Ephesians 4:31 says, "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice." So the idea that, like, you have this bad intent as you go into whether it's conversations or interactions with people, and that's something that we need to set behind us as we interact with others and as we, like, grow in relationship. You know, one of the things that comes to mind immediately, and we'll touch on this later on, but one of the things that comes to mind immediately is, like, when we are selfish, and so we walk into a conversation or into an argument with bad intent and malice, and we go, okay, you know what, I'm going to fight for what I want, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get my way. And so that can look very different for different people. You know, like I grew up in a situation where it was not uncommon for people to cry and use tears to get their way and make you feel bad and feel guilty. It was not uncommon for people to, like, use other things such as, like, their authority or their money or whatever to control you and control the scenario. And so it was very, like, interesting when Reuben and I first started dating and we got married, how my mind would go to some of those places. Like, oh, okay, like, if I cry, he'll probably feel bad and I'll probably get my way. And realizing early on, and realizing early on that, like, wow, this is not, like, that is not an okay way for us to navigate our relationship and navigate our conflict.
All right, we're going to talk after this, yo. All right, move on to the next one. You want to read the next verse?
Oh, this last one is Ezekiel 45, verse 9, and we just kind of picked it out because even though it's talking generally to like an entire nation about this subject, but I think it's so important to see that, like, God is speaking to people, and he talks about, like, putting away violence and oppression, and he says execute justice and righteousness. That, like, that is the heart of God. He doesn't want people to feel like they are being abused. He wants people to feel like there is righteousness and justice, and that like, that is the God he is, and that's how he wants his people to be.
Yeah. Emotional abuse is a huge one. It can be one of those sleeping giants, you know? It's one of those hidden ones. You don't really realize it's happening until you're already in it. So that's a big one. Number 3, what could be a red flag? Anger issues. Anger issues. Oh, man. If you're someone that struggles with anger, wrestles with anger, this can come off in many ugly, ugly ways. You know, we've all heard of it or seen it, or you know, maybe have friends who've gone through something like this, or maybe we've just seen it in movies or whatever. But nonetheless, there's some truth to it. We see the anger issues with the, you know, physical abuse. Sometimes it kind of comes out that way. Threats, you know, that you're making, ultimatums, yelling, hitting, throwing things. It happens. It happens. Being unforgiving, right? Holding on to the place. No, I'm standing my ground, being vengeful, and we all can get angry. It's different from getting angry in a situation and dealing with it versus anger for someone being so dominant and out of control and not dealt with properly that it becomes this thing that ends up being a red flag. It has these, repercussions or these aftermath effects that we're all dealing with because of whatever the situation might be. So the scripture talks a lot about it, right? So if we go to Ephesians, Psalms 37:8, scripture says, refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Don't run to the thing. Don't get heated. I love that word wrath in the Greek there. Don't get heated. That's really what he's talking about. Proverbs 14:17. A man of quick temper acts foolishly, and a man of evil devices is hated. And it's true. When we're in that rage mode, it's crazy how sometimes we just do things, we'll say things, and it's usually because of that root of we're just so angry. But they did, so they deserve, and we'll kind of justify it in certain ways. But it's definitely a red flag to recognize if you're with someone or someone who's in a situation where they have extreme anger issues and it's starting to come out in some of these ways.
Yeah, if you are someone who struggles with anger and struggles with a short fuse, if you're somebody who especially struggles with like explosive anger, not like that quiet seething anger, then I highly, highly encourage you to remove yourself from those situations and those conversations in the moment and allow yourself to calm down before you actually enter that conversation again, just so that you're not saying things or doing things that you'll regret and not going into that situation where you might be now emotionally or physically abusing your partner or your friend or family member, whoever it is.
Yeah. And then James chapter 1, verse 20, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. So anger is a big one.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think we talked about it quite a bit, but when it comes to anger, I don't want to like completely gloss over it without saying that, anger is natural and we can all feel angry and we will all feel angry, and it's natural to have some sort of anger towards your partner. And it's not the anger that is the red flag. So when you see that, like, well, my partner gets angry, especially if like you're provoking them to anger, which like people do, like sometimes we poke at the sore spot because we want that person to react. So just because your partner gets angry does not mean that it's a red flag. It's how they deal with that anger and what they do in response. That being said, number 4, our next red flag is having loose boundaries. So this kind of goes, we've talked about boundaries before. We've talked about like the importance of them, but loose boundaries are a major red flag when you're in a relationship, because generally it indicates a lack of commitment. Because they are not getting something that they need or that they don't feel satisfied in the relationship, they are seeking it out from somewhere else. So some of the things that come to mind are possibly having too many friends of the opposite sex, or having an inappropriate closeness with friends of the opposite sex, being too flirty, having a history of short flings, maybe seeking a very physical relationship with you. Another one is jealousy. And now jealousy can fall into so many different categories, and it can kind of be a part of a few of these that we've mentioned. But when it comes to like loose boundaries, I find that a lot of the times people who I speak to who are very jealous, who have loose boundaries, the reason that they're so jealous is because they're like, they are probably doing to me what I'm doing to other people. So they're like, oh, if I'm always flirting with other guys, and he's probably always flirting with other girls, and vice versa.
That's good. Scripture says, keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. And James chapter 1, Verse 19, know this, my beloved brothers, he says, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. The scripture talks so much about making sure you have guidelines, healthy boundaries, guardrails, certain values that you hold on to that are kind of like, they're set there for a reason. It's what will make sure that you're valuing what you truly want to value without being carried away with the emotion in the moment. Because let me tell you, it can happen. And it's crazy how this one actually comes up a lot, especially in Christian circles. How you'll have two people who are, they met online and they went out for a date, and you meet someone who's just like, oh, sex before marriage is fine. You'll be surprised. It happens quite often. And I so many questions run through my mind, and the first thing that I would encourage you to do in those moments when you see someone who very openly goes, yeah, I'm a Christian, and I'm very open with this very loose boundary about something that is very important, like sex before marriage. Yeah, red flag. Red flag. Don't encourage the, oh, but maybe they will change and maybe I can save them. No, that would just be you making a poor decision now. You move on. I'm being a little bit silly because like each unique situation comes with its own nuances, but someone who is, coming with a history of short flings, someone who is coming in with a history of not being able to, lack of commitment, not being able to commit and really kind of show that they're sincere, you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle because in those situations, you never know. You never know what can happen as you continue the relationship, or as you, date a few more times. You'll probably recognize, wow, what am I in here? Maybe I do need to make a different decision. So not wavering on those boundaries that you have set. If you have not set boundaries, red flag. Set some boundaries. Well, I don't know what my boundaries are, Pastor Reuben. Yeah, set some. Set some. You need it. Why? Because what are you going to tell the other person when you're like, and if the other person is a good Christian, they should go, hey, you don't have like healthy boundaries. You're like, this is off limits. That's a red, like, no, go set, Anyhow, that's my rant.
Okay, so our next red flag is dishonesty. When we talk about, obviously dishonesty is a red flag. Everybody knows that dishonesty is a red flag. And we think of just like some of the major things like lying and cheating and stealing. But dishonesty can also manifest itself in some smaller ways too. Things like hiding things. Like, I may not tell you the entire story. I'm not forthcoming with the facts in my life. I'm not willing to share or open up. And so some of those things are still indicators that there's dishonesty there and possibly a lack of trust that hasn't been built. But, it's different when you're just getting to know somebody and they're a little bit more guarded versus like, okay, we've been friends for a while or we've been dating for a while and this person is still not forthcoming about things in their life. If I ask them like where they're going or who they're going with, I don't get that full story. If I ask them, they only give me the bare minimum response, and that bare minimum response is often leaving out some of those key details that might be important to me or hurtful to me if I find out. Another thing would be like having to check up on their story. If like they tell you stuff and you're finding that, they tell me something and then I find out later from someone else that wasn't the case, and it keeps happening. And I have to keep checking up on their story and keep going, well, is this still true, and are they actually telling me the truth here?
Yeah. This is one of those ones that even the world will agree with us that this is a red flag. But believe it or not all of these, the world will go, yeah, absolutely, for sure. But this one, for sure. Like, I feel like this is pretty obvious one. The scriptures, talk about the importance of being honest, putting away falsehood. Ephesians 4:25 talks about it. Colossians 3:8-10 actually says something really interesting. But now you must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator. As a Christian, here's the thing. If you've truly put on the new self, you're truly renewed in Christ, this is a value to you. And if you are just trying to get to know someone and this is not a value to them, chances are they need to do some growing in their faith before they're ready to date. So rather than trying to continue the relationship while they're figuring that out, let them go figure that out. And if it's really God's plan, it'll fall, it'll fall as it may. But instead, you focus on, hey, you know what? This is where I'm at. And I need to work on where I'm at. I need to get to the place where I'm embracing the new person that I am in Jesus. Not living out of the responses with anger or wrath or malice or slander or, lying to sort of benefit myself in some sort of way.
Do you want to? Okay, I'll let you drink. Do you want to start the next one?
Yeah. Poor treatment of others. Poor treatment of others. This one comes to kind of observing what you see the other people do. You ever done the thing where you're like on a date and you're seeing how the person responds to the waiter? It's a huge one, right? It's like, are you kind to the people that's serving you, or are you kind of like, serve me, servant? Like what are you doing? And trust me, they exist.
They're the people who just do the hand gestures, like.
Oh, that irritates me. No, but here's the thing, like what kind, like how do they treat other people? Let's dig into that a little bit. Are the people that love to gossip, love to talk behind people's back, love to chit chat?
Even like when it comes to that, right? When it comes to gossip, even consider people who, like, they may not be a significant person in their lives, like maybe a coworker, someone who's not a friend. Like, how do they talk about their coworkers or their boss? Or if they are the boss, how do they talk about their staff and their employees? Are they people who like talk highly of them, or are they constantly complaining about them and like talking badly about them, talking about, oh, they're so dumb and they're so like annoying, they're so this and they're so that?
Yeah. Do they look down on others? When they talk about other people, are they like, wow, this person's so small and insignificant, and look at me, I'm so big, but look at them, you so puny? Like, how do they speak about other people? And I know I'm stepping on some toes right now, because I know we all, behind the scenes in our own little, private ways and private lives, we'll talk about other people, and sometimes, let's just be real. If Jesus was there, right there, listening to the conversation, would we say the same things? Thank you for that, Jason. I appreciate that. But that's the truth. That's the truth. Like, would we? The answer is no. We probably wouldn't. And yet, we carry ourselves like Jesus is not always where we are. And so, I think it's important to recognize, man, we gotta be kind, even when nobody's looking. Even in our own heads, we gotta be kind. It starts from there, so that we're not speaking hurtful things, so that we're not being people who are just, we're just superficial, and not really being genuine, authentic and sincere.
Yeah, and just general kindness overall, and bearing in mind, like, are they people who seem like they care for others, go out of their way to like love others and consider people's feelings? Or are they like ordering people around? Do they have basic manners? Like, are they saying please and thank you, or are they just kind of demanding things? Another big one is, are they superficial or fake? Like, do you feel like when they talk to someone, they might be nice to their face, but then behind their backs, you're like, oh, like, I know that they don't actually like them? Or they seem too interested in whether it's things like appearance, or like they just kind of keep the subject surface level, and they're not like willing to really like get to know people and dig deep. Having some of those things in mind as you assess how they interact with others, because remember that your interactions with them could look very different. They could be totally fine with you, and they could be 100% positive with you because you guys are in a relationship, but then their interactions with others are also important. It's how you're going to relate with, whether it's their friends, their family, your friends, your family. Like, just people that you like engage with in the world and encounter in the world, and you don't want to feel like, okay, every time I go out with this person, every time I see their friends or family, I feel like there's this massive disconnect where they're being fake, or they're hiding things, or they are talking about them behind their backs, or I just feel negative every single time I'm in that interaction.
Yeah. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32 says, "Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you." Be kind. Number 7.
Selfishness. So selfishness is our next
Another red flag.
And when we were talking about this, it was hard to fully define, because we all have a little bit of selfishness, and innately we naturally want what we want, and we think of ourselves. But I think we're talking about like giving into that selfishness and like extreme selfishness. So for example, that can manifest in not taking initiative, being somebody who's like, well, they always have to come to me. They always have to, like, whether it's talk to me or plan the dates or do whatever, and it always has to be about me, and I'm never going to go out of my way to do anything for them or to love them. Being unwilling to compromise. So insisting on your way no matter what. It always has to be your way. It always has to be 100% your way. It can't just be, okay, we'll do my thing, but also your thing.
You're the one who has to talk more than listen. You're the one who's just like, listen, you're going to listen to what I'm saying, and it's going to be this way, and you're not a good listener. You're more like, I'm just interested in what I have to say. I'm not really interested in what you have to say.
Yeah, so really having the focus on themselves and really going, I am the center of the universe, and you just are here. You're just a part of my universe, but it's still my universe.
Yeah, you exist to serve me in some form. Scripture says, "For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice." And then, one of my favorite examples of how to just live our lives as Christians. Apart from this, but also it includes this. Do nothing, Philippians 2. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interests of others. Have this mind, this mindset, this way of thinking among yourselves, which is yours in Christ. Meaning he set that example. And we then claim that. And when it comes to relationships, let me be just, here's some one-on-one advice, all right? This one's free. This one right here saves marriages. Let me just be real. Because Dora and I have been through the ringer. We've been through ups and downs, and choosing to embrace the way Jesus embraced us, choosing to love the way Jesus loved us and loves us today is a game changer. When we choose to truly lay down our interests, like radically. I'm not just being like, oh, okay, fine, we won't eat chocolate ice cream today. Like, I'm talking about things that matter. It is a game changer. And so do not just highlight this verse. If you have a Bible today, highlight the verse, write it down, mark it up, memorize it. Because in those moments when you're deep in a relationship, say it's like you're not just dating and so you can kind of like leave, but say you're married and you're like, we're in this, choosing to embrace this is a game changer, especially if you're struggling with, it's my way versus their way, and you're not able to figure out a way forward.
Yeah, I think sometimes this one can manifest itself even in subtle ways. We've talked about this a few times as well, but like the idea of like self-care being a major focus, and like there's nothing wrong with self-care, and I absolutely 100% support taking care of yourself and taking care of your physical and emotional rest and your physical and emotional health. But sometimes people use that as an excuse to be like, well, I'm not going to do this for my partner or for my family or for my friends because like, oh, it's too much for me.
What's the sacrifice? If you're not laying something down that will be good for you. I'll just be real. I have 3 kids. My wife working full-time. I working full-time. Have a lot of responsibilities, and the people who are in, our guys' prayer group or part of a church know this, but I haven't been able to go to the gym, have a healthy workout in a very long time. And I want to. I desperately want to. But you know what's really important for me is making sure that my kids have a present father and not a father that's just not able to be present with them. And so I'm like, I'm going to try and pivot, figure out other ways that I can do this. It's still a major sacrifice for a guy that used to go to the gym 2 times a day. Like a major sacrifice. It's not something small. But you're going, you know what? Like, this is the way I can love and serve my family. And you know what? Eventually, my kids will grow up and they won't need me the amount of time that they do. And then I will, I'll get there. And in the meantime, we'll do other things that will help me feel healthier. But if it's not costing you something, what's the sacrifice?
Yeah, and I think like as much as we need to like care for ourselves, there is this element of, well, as believers, especially when you enter into a marriage, God has called you to lay down your life for your spouse. And if you're not willing to lay down some time or some effort or some money or some whatever it is that they're asking you to sacrifice, then where is the evidence that you're willing to lay down your life?
That's good. Last but not least, because this is not an exhaustive list of red flags, but just a list that we were like, let's just talk about these ones. Pride. Number 8, pride. Oh, that was a very audible one. I don't know if it's good or bad.
So we mentioned this already earlier, but someone who looks down on you or on others. Along with that, somebody who is not teachable. So they're not okay with being corrected. They're not okay with being told, that they are wrong. They think they're always right. They think they know best. Someone who's arrogant, who's like, nope, like I am the best of the best and I know everything. Whether they criticize you or correct you often. So if you feel like, they always have something, whether it's a just straight up criticism or a constructive criticism, but if it's just constant criticism, if they're belittling in the way that they speak to you and the things that they say. Another one is if they rebel against authority figures. If they're constantly like they have a problem with every single authority figure in their life, then I would have a big question mark that like, oh, this person is probably prideful because this person probably feels like they are better than and know better than these authority figures, and so they don't want to submit to or give control to those figures.
And that one is so important. You might not think it is. Let me just put this out there for you, just because let me just connect the dots. They can't submit to an authority figure, say it's like a boss at work or whatever it might be, right? In marriage, when you get married, you actually are submitting to one another. How do you think that's going to work? I'll tell you how. It's not. If they don't have a pattern of learning and understanding how to submit to authority in their life, that gets a little bit of control in their life. When you get married, it's more than your 9 to 5, let me tell you that. And you're going to find it way harder to go, I'm going to actually submit and kind of get to that place where we're actually working with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So many verses talk about this. We're not going to get into all of them, so we just chose one for you today. But Proverbs 16 verse 8 says, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." And the idea there is just that, like, pride inevitably leads to destruction. Pride inevitably leads to just so much hurt and pain and chaos in its wake. Yeah. So when you're dealing with somebody who you see like has a tendency towards pride and conceit, it does not bode well. Like be prepared for the storm and the fallout of the storm.
Yeah. In many ways, failure to understand and practice love God's way is really what leads to many of these red flags, if you really look at it. A famous passage, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4 to 7. I'll just read a little bit. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant. Or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things, and it ends there saying love never ends. And oftentimes I find that, whether it's someone's, upbringing, home environment, maybe it's just the way someone kind of just like adapted to things in school, in university, with siblings, the way they treat other people, some of these things kind of just happen to be. And they end up having these red flags that is just something that they're missing. And they're kind of missing this massive void of understanding love in the agape way, love in God's way. And it sucks, but it ends up being kind of the case, right?
Yeah, and I think it ties back to that initial red flag of not being with a believer, because when you are a believer, you hold them to this. You hold them accountable to this, and you expect them to live accordingly. And you expect to live accordingly too. And so if you read that same passage, verses 4-7, it very clearly is the opposite of all those red flags that we said. That the kindness, it talks about the jealousy, it talks about arrogance and rudeness and like lying and truth and all of those things. And so we're actually saying, like, as a whole, as believers, we want to embody all the green flags. And so if they hold to that first thing, if they hold to the fact that they are a believer and they truly love Jesus and they're truly out to be like Jesus and identify with him, then they need to be living this out daily. And so those red flags should not be there.
Yeah, it's good.
So, question time. Why are we so drawn to red flags?
Because that's the truth. Let's just be real for a second. Sometimes, not everybody, but sometimes we're drawn to red flags. We're drawn to people who might have a controlling issue or an anger issue or an emotionally abusive issue. And I think one of the reasons might be, there's so many reasons, okay? But I think one of the reasons might be is it might be familiar to us. We might have grown up in an environment where we had a mom or a dad who treated us a specific way, and because of that, we kind of fell into an unhealthy pattern where we were looking for that in a spouse. And so it could be because it's familiar to us, right?
Yeah, I mean, I made a joke a few weeks ago that, as someone who is highly anxious, my body sometimes doesn't know how to differentiate between anxiety and excitement. It's just like, oh, all of these things flowing through me all feel the same, so it's all negative. And I think that we do that, our bodies and our brains just kind of adjust to whatever our norm is. And even though it's a bad norm, it's normal and it feels familiar. And so in some ways, it feels safe. It's not actually safe, but it feels safe because it's what we know. And so we are drawn to those same familiar things. Another one is because we set ourselves up for failure intentionally. We're like, I know that this is going to fail because of all the red flags. And so I have a fail-safe excuse for why it failed. And so when this relationship inevitably crumbles, which it will, I am okay with that because it's not on me. It's not my fault. It's just that it was bound to happen because of all these red flags. It was the other person's fault or it was the situation's fault, but it's not my fault. And so we protect ourselves in some way. It's a defense mechanism that we use.
Also, let's just be real. Sometimes we're kind of like, I want what I can't have. Right? We're like, I want what I can't have, so I'm going to run after the thing that everybody says is not good, I can't have it, because I'll be the one that will do the impossible. And what we end up doing is doing the very probable, which is hurting ourselves. I've never really seen this end well.
Yeah. And I'm going to say, this is not my original idea, but this is something that someone shared with me recently, actually. And it just rang so true for me. And as I heard it, I was like, absolutely. But for a lot of people, we like the idea of the challenge. We like the idea of feeling special because this person has changed for us. And so they used to be a red flag and they no longer are because of the fact that they changed for me. And I am the one that caused them to change because they loved me so much.
Wow. That's good. So what do we do if we find a red flag? Like, say, we're in a relationship and we find a red flag, what do we do? The first thing I think is it depends where you are in the relationship, because it changes. So say if, because it's not always a run. Say if you just met someone for coffee and there's something glaring that is an obvious red flag, based on what it is, and you need to use discernment here. I can't make the decisions for you. There are definitely reasons for you to go, I'm not going back on this date. I'm not going back. No, because I can see the red flag. This is not healthy. Because a red flag, really, if we go to its understanding, a red flag, in terms of like being red, is like the signal, red, stop what's going on. Doesn't mean run away, it means stop, and then consider. So stop and process, stop and think, what's going on? Understand what the issue, what the situation might actually be. So if you're dating someone and you're kind of like in that early stages where you're not entirely sure, if this is the person that you're going to be with, and then you happen to, discover a red flag, or you think something might be a red flag, or if you're also engaged, and you also get to this place, the most important thing you got to do is you got to have that conversation. You got to have, we talk about it all the time here at Zoe. We got to have that crucial conversation. We got to have that uncomfortable conversation. Talk about it. Address it. Ask the questions you need to ask. Because the truth is that if it is something, super serious, you might have to leave. You're not committed. Dating for a long period of time, or you've now been engaged, is not the same as you are married. And so there might be a space where you might need to leave. It's a little bit different if you're married, because now as Christians, we believe, one union, man, women, before God, forever. This is God's design for marriage until you're in it, and there's a red flag that comes up. Didn't notice it up until this point. Didn't see it.
Although you probably should. Like, yes, it happens sometimes that like a red flag occurs after the fact, but those are very rare instances. If you're doing the work beforehand, you should have been able to recognize that before you got married.
Yeah. But say you just did it, and now you're discovering, or maybe you're now willing to address the red flag that you have recognized. It's important. You got to have those conversations, and each case differs. In my opinion, you got to try and work through it, both of you, and because you both are Christian, and hopefully you have found yourself in a good church that you call home, where you can, go to the pastors that you trust and get their input and the advice, et cetera. But yes, there is also the exception, where there might be an instance where it just doesn't work out. One person does need to leave because the red flag. And because of the red flag in its nature. But you never want to just get there. You want to be able to work through it, deal with the issue, and hopefully you're able to grow from that.
Yeah, I think it was really important that you said red means stop. It doesn't mean
run.
It doesn't mean no. Red means stop. And it just means stop, and you can consider and think about what comes next, and what comes next can look different in every scenario. But I think we have to always remember red means stop. And I laugh because I think about like our 3-year-old who just told us the other day that green means stop and red means go. I think sometimes as adults we make those mistakes, and we see the red flags and we just run in head first. And like we see somebody else who is giving up all the green flags, and we're just like, they're too boring, or they're too nice. No, like we need to identify whether something is, are we running away from the green flags because of our own broken history and our own brokenness, or are we like, is there something actually wrong in this situation? Yeah. So red means stop, and we think about it, and then we consider where we go from there.
How many red flags are too many?
Well, you can't quantify that. You can't quantify it. I mean, if this person is just a walking red flag, like everything they do is a red flag, I think you have a problem. But But the chances are that's not the case. Like, most people are not that bad. Most people are, like, they have a couple of things. And, like, here's the thing. We all struggle with things in these categories. Like, none of us actually are perfect at all of this. Like, none of us have no anger issues, no emotional abuse issues, no selfishness issues, no pride issues. Like, we all struggle with them in different ways, and maybe all of them to different degrees. It's about, like, is this a predominant, like, if I were to describe this person, am I going to call them selfish? Am I going to call them prideful? Am I going to say, well, they're dishonest or a liar or a cheater? It's very different than, like, oh, yeah, sometimes, you know, they fight a little bit too hard for the things that they want. They're not really willing to compromise. But it's only once in a while, and then when we talk about it, we end up coming to a compromise. You know, those are different scenarios. So can you quantify that? I don't think you can. I think even just one red flag is enough for you to stop and consider, you know, what do you do next?
Is there ever a reason to overlook or ignore a red flag?
No.
Yeah, overlook, no. But like we said, you know, dialogue, work through it, be gracious, forgive, yes. You have to be understanding, put yourself in their shoes, understand where they're, you know, trying to come from. It's a part of the process. If they're willing to work on the thing that they've acknowledged as an issue, work through it. If you know, again, depends where you are in the relationship, but typically, like, if you're deeper in it, you want to work through it.
Yeah, and I think it's this fine line that we have to recognize exists, because on one side, yes, you want to be gracious, you want to forgive, you want to give somebody a chance to be imperfect and be human. But at the same time, you don't want to put yourself in harm's way, and you need to be cautious and guarded. So when you see that red flag manifest itself, there needs to be an element of, like, recognition for you that goes, okay, I have to be a little bit on my toes and be aware of what's happening so that I'm not getting hurt in this scenario. And I approach it with caution, approach it with wisdom, but still approach it and have those conversations.
All right, last one before we take a quick snack break and you guys send in all your Q&A questions that we're going to answer in a few moments. What if you are the red flag? What if you're the red flag?
Have any of you guys seen those, like the TikToks where it's
There's
like...
a TikTok that's going viral right now. The guy, I don't know where he's from, but he's just like, he was online. He was online dating, and he was sick of it. So he's like, I'm just gonna try a new form. Guy has like 22 million views on TikTok, and he's like, he has this crazy list. You know, nobody from Canada, and like this ridiculous list, and like he's just like, you know.
She has to have a car because I don't have a car.
Yeah, we both cannot have a car.
She has to have money because I don't have money.
Yeah, it's.
That's not what I was gonna say, but there's one
red flag. Oh, okay.
I think we spend too much time on social media, but there's one that's been going around where it's like you look up what does toxic look like, and it describes you and not him. And it's like,
oh, that's good. That's good.
And it's like there are times where like that's just true. It's like you have, like, for some of you sitting here, it might be the case where you're listening to this list and you're like, oh, that's me. Like, I identify with this, and that's okay.
Yeah. It's
okay if you find yourself in and among the red flags, because, like I said, we all struggle with these things to different degrees.
Yeah.
But there are things that you need to do as well.
Yeah. If you're single, perfect. Stay single. Not forever. Hold on. Let me finish. Not forever.
It doesn't mean you are unmarriable. That's not what it means.
No, I'm joking. If you are single, stop right there. It's actually the best time for you to work on you right now. Don't try and confuse that with adding another person that is just going to end up in a much more awful spot because of where you are. Pause. The most healthiest thing you can do is go pause. I'm not dating because I need to work through some of my things. And being single is the best time to be able to do that. What if you're already in a relationship? So you're dating, say you're engaged, or you are married. Be humble. Go to your partner. Acknowledge it. Talk about it. Be open about it. Be real about it. Scripture talks about humility and how God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. Truly believe if you're in that situation, or if you're in that situation in the future and you find yourself going, wow, I have a real, anger problem, or I just lie to get myself out of whatever, right? Acknowledge that. Go to your partner and be like, hey, listen, I need to talk to you about something. This is what's been happening. This is what's been going on, and I need to first apologize. And second, and here's the crucial part, ask for their help. Go, I need your help to help me work through this issue. When you walk in with that humility, it's not only disarming, okay, but now you're setting yourself up for success to actually work on the issue. Whenever we hide things and leave it in the darkness, that's when it'll kind of just fester and grow, and it'll just become all sorts of mutated yuckiness that we don't want to be part of. But when we bring it to the light and we allow our partner, the person that we're trusting in the most, to step in and go, hey, help me work through this, that person will help you be accountable and support you, encourage you to talk to your pastor about it, and help you to also be accountable and support you, help you to share with the prayer group that you're a part of, or small group you're a part of, whatever, and to help keep you accountable and support you. And you'll start to see, truly, I've seen this happen time and time again, you'll start to see freedom from the things that may have been plaguing you at one point, and it is phenomenal.
Yeah, and seeking out like accountability from friends and family members who are kind of in life with you regularly, so that, because obviously, yes, we encourage you often to talk to like some of those spiritual leaders and like counselors in your life, but they're not seeing you necessarily on a day-to-day basis. So having people in your life who are recognizing this on a daily basis, who can call you out, who can hold you accountable, who can, in a loving way, just say, hey, like, I know that we talked about this already, but that was, your anger came out again in that situation. It was a little bit like aggressive the way that you handled that.
Yeah.
Having those people in your life is so important. And if you don't have friends like that, start cultivating those relationships, because you need good friends who are going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Another thing that, comes to mind is just don't disregard the difficulty and the challenge behind some of these things. Like, some of these things are such deeply ingrained cycles and patterns. Some of them are actually very almost like addictive patterns that we fall into, that it's hard to break those things. And so if necessary, like, seek professional help.
Yeah.
Don't wait until like your anger completely, like you blow a fuse and you're like, now I'm like physically abusing my partner. Don't wait till it gets to those like really crucial moments. If you need to, seek professional help and get someone involved who can help you with those things and give you some of the like guiding principles and mechanisms you can use so that you can cope, so that you can actually do, you can see change and see progress being made.
Yeah, and if you're the other person who's on the other side, here's your space to respond in the way Jesus would, without judgment and with a lot of grace and a lot of love and support. Because if they're willing to approach you like this in humility, respond in that moment with love and with care.
And address it early.
Yeah.
Don't wait until it's like 3 years of fighting in and you're like, you're so selfish. You've always been selfish. You never do anything for me. Like, at that point, you're already like, emotions are high. You're fed up. Like, you're at a breaking point, and it's just so hard to walk that back. But if you start early on, when it's like, okay, I'm noticing this pattern, then have that conversation. And it's hard and it's scary, and especially at the beginning. Like, I know that fear. It's like, I want to address this because I'm bothered by it, but also I don't want to address it because I'm afraid you're gonna leave. Yeah. And so don't put yourself in that position. If that person is going to leave because you brought up a red flag, they probably have red flag number 8, which is pride. And so if that's the case, like, you might be better off. Have those conversations and have them early.
Good. Well, that's it for today. Take a few moments, grab a snack, say hello to your neighbor, and my number will go up. So feel free to send in all of your questions, and we will be back in a few minutes. Okay.